The rain hit my penthouse windows like bullets, sharp, angry, relentless. 5 months after I signed those divorce papers, my phone rang at 2 in the morning, and the voice on the other end made my blood turn to ice. Mr. Valerio, this is Dr. Nguyen from Memorial Hospital in Savannah. We need to inform you. She named you as the father. I didn't breathe, didn't move. The city lights below blurred into streaks of gold and red, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was 8 years old watching my father's coffin sink into the ground. Fear. But let me rewind. Let me show you how a man like me, Dante Valerio, the king of Miami's underground, the shadow behind every closed-door deal, ended up holding a phone with shaking hands, staring at my reflection in rain-soaked glass. If this story already has your heart pounding, hit that like button right now. Because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about power, control, and the one thing that can bring any man to his knees, love. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. My name is Dante Valerio. Born in Napoli, raised in the blood-soaked streets of South Beach. I built an empire before I turned 30. Luxury hotels that touched the sky, nightclubs where senators drank next to drug lords, shipping lines that moved everything the law said shouldn't move. My eyes? Cold silver, the kind that made grown men look away when I walked into a room. My rules? Simple. Never love what you can't protect. Never trust what you can't control. I followed that code like religion. Until Raina Caldwell walked into my penthouse 3 years ago with fabric samples and a smile that didn't ask for permission. She wasn't like the women who threw themselves at money or the ones who whispered my name in fear. Raina was an interior designer, hired to redo my main residence, and she moved through my space like she belonged there, measuring windows, touching walls, rearranging furniture I'd never given a damn about. She wore simple dresses, kept her hair natural, spoke in a voice that didn't try to seduce or manipulate. When I barked orders, she'd look at me with those brown eyes, not defiant, not scared, just patient, like she was waiting for me to finish being whoever I pretended to be. You don't have to yell, she said one afternoon, standing by the window where sunlight made her skin glow. I heard you the first time. No one talked to me like that. No one. But instead of rage, I felt something crack open inside my chest, something I'd buried under concrete and cash and the weight of other men's fear. I started finding excuses to be home when she worked, started asking questions that had nothing to do with paint colors or furniture placement, started noticing how she tilted her head when she listened, how she'd hum old gospel songs under her breath while she sketched designs, how she'd leave little sticky notes on my desk with reminders like, drink water, and the world won't end if you sleep. 6 months later, I asked her to dinner. She said yes, but only if I promised not to talk business. I didn't know how to talk about anything else, so I sat there like a fool while she told me about growing up in Charleston, about her grandmother's garden, about how she believed broken things could always be made beautiful again if you knew where to look. Even people? I asked. She reached across the table, placed her hand over mine. Especially people. I married her 4 months after that. Small ceremony, no press, just her family and the few people in my world who weren't on my payroll. She wore white lace and cried during the vows, and when the preacher said I could kiss my bride, I tasted salt and something I didn't have a name for. For 2 years, I lived in 2 worlds. By day, I was the Valerio everyone feared, the man who moved shipments through customs with a phone call, who settled disputes with envelopes full of cash or silence that came from the bottom of Biscayne Bay. By night, I came home to Raina's cooking, to her curled up on the couch with design magazines, to her calling me Antonio, my real name, the one my mother used before she forgot how to say anything at all. She never asked about the blood on my cuffs or the meetings that went till dawn. She'd just draw me a bath, sit on the edge of the tub, and read poetry out loud while I tried to scrub the day off my skin. I thought I could keep her separate. Thought I could build a wall high enough that my world would never touch hers. I was wrong. It started small, Raina asking why certain men called at odd hours, why I had 3 phones instead of 1, why I'd leave in the middle of dinner and come back smelling like cigar smoke and something metallic. I'd kiss her forehead, tell her it was business, tell her not to worry. But Raina wasn't stupid. One night, I came home at 4 in the morning and found her standing in my office, holding a phone I'd hidden in my desk drawer. The screen was still lit, messages in code, photos of men I'd dealt with, numbers that didn't add up to anything legal. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "Who are you?" she whispered. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the truth was I didn't know anymore. She started watching me after that, not with love, but with the kind of careful attention you give a snake that might strike. She'd flinch when I raised my voice. She'd lock the bedroom door some nights. She'd stare at me across the dinner table like she was sitting with a stranger. Then came the night that ended everything. I had a meeting in the warehouse district, routine collection, nothing complicated. But Raina had followed me. I don't know how, don't know why. Maybe she needed proof. Maybe she needed to see the monster everyone said I was. She watched through a cracked window as a man named Jerome begged for more time, begged for mercy, begged for his life. She watched as I nodded to my lieutenant. She watched as Jerome's begging stopped. When I got home that night, the penthouse was dark, silent. I called her name, checked every room, and found nothing but her wedding ring sitting on my nightstand next to a blood-stained cufflink I'd forgotten to hide. No note, no goodbye. Just absence, so loud it rang in my ears like a scream. The tabloids went crazy. Billionaire's wife vanishes after mysterious split. They said she couldn't handle the pressure, couldn't handle the spotlight, couldn't handle being married to power. They ran photos of her smiling at charity events, spun stories about mental breakdowns and secret affairs. But I knew the truth. Raina didn't leave because she was weak. She left because she was smart enough to survive. The divorce papers arrived 3 weeks later, delivered by a lawyer I'd never heard of, to an address I couldn't trace. She wanted nothing. No money, no property, no alimony. Just her freedom and a promise that I'd never come looking. I signed them in silence, my hand steady even though my chest felt like it was caving in. My underboss, Marcus, stood in the doorway of my office, watching me with those calculating eyes. "You gonna let her just walk away?" he asked. I looked up at him, and whatever he saw in my face made him step back. She already did. For 5 months, I became the version of myself everyone expected, colder, sharper, more ruthless. I expanded operations into Atlanta, took over 3 territories that belonged to the Corelli family, moved product through channels that hadn't existed 6 months ago. I worked 18-hour days, slept 4 hours if I slept at all, and filled every silence with noise so I wouldn't hear her voice in my head. But late at night, when the city finally went quiet, I'd pull up photos on my phone. Raina laughing in the sunlight streaming through our kitchen, Raina dancing in the living room to music only she could hear, Raina asleep with her hand tucked under her cheek like a child. I could command armies, could move millions with a signature, could make men disappear with a word. But I couldn't make her come back. Meanwhile, 800 miles away in Savannah, Raina was living a life I knew nothing about. She'd changed her name to Elena Dorsey, rented a tiny apartment above a bakery, and got a job at a flower shop on Broad Street. She'd wake up at dawn, arrange bouquets for weddings and funerals, smile at customers who'd never know she'd once lived in a penthouse overlooking the ocean. But every morning, she'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror and place both hands on her stomach, feeling the flutter of movement that wasn't digestion or nerves. She was 3 months pregnant when she left me. 5 months pregnant now, and I didn't know. She'd thought about telling me, had picked up the phone a dozen times, typed out messages she'd never sent. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jerome's face. Saw the way I'd nodded. Saw the man I became when I thought no one was watching. How do you tell a monster he's about to be a father? How do you bring a child into a world built on blood? So she kept silent, worked her shifts at the flower shop, saved every dollar she could, and made plans to disappear even further once the baby came. Maybe North Carolina. Maybe Tennessee. Somewhere small and forgettable, where the name Valerio meant nothing and she could raise her son, because she knew somehow it was a boy, in peace. She'd already picked a name, Luca, her grandmother's favorite. But God or fate or whatever moves the universe had different plans. It happened on a Tuesday night. Raina was closing up the shop, counting the register, when the cramping started. Sharp and low and wrong. She tried to breathe through it, tried to tell herself it was normal, but when she stood up, the world tilted sideways and she grabbed the counter to keep from falling. The shop owner, Mrs. Chun, found her 20 minutes later curled up on the floor, her dress soaked with blood. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and voices, and someone squeezing her hand too tight. The emergency room smelled like bleach and panic. Doctors spoke in words she couldn't process: preeclampsia, emergency cesarean, hemorrhaging, critical condition. "Do you have family we can call?" a nurse asked, clipboard in hand. Raina's vision was tunneling, going dark at the edges. She thought about her mother, dead 10 years now. Thought about her sister in Atlanta who'd cut ties after the wedding. Thought about the man whose child was fighting to survive inside her, the man she'd run from because loving him felt like drowning. "Dante," she whispered, her voice barely there. "Dante Valerio, Miami." The nurse wrote it down, her pen hesitating over the last name like she recognized it. "Is he the father?" Raina closed her eyes, felt tears slip down into her hair. Yes. They wheeled her into surgery at 11:37 p.m. By midnight, they'd pulled a baby boy from her womb, 3 pounds, 2 ounces, lungs barely developed, heart beating like a hummingbird's wings. They rushed him to the NICU while doctors worked to stop the bleeding that wouldn't stop, that kept pouring out of Raina like her body had decided it was done, like it had given everything it had to give and couldn't hold on anymore. At 2:15 a.m., a resident made the call to Miami. At 2:16 a.m., my phone rang. I stared at that phone for 3 full rings before I answered. My hand was steady, my voice controlled, but something in my gut knew. The way animals know when earthquakes are coming, when storms are building over the horizon. "Valerio. Mr. Valerio, this is Dr. Gwyn from Memorial Hospital in Savannah, Georgia." The voice was young, exhausted, careful. "We have a patient here, Raina Caldwell. She's listed you as the father of her child and as her emergency contact." The floor dropped out from under me. "What?" "She's in critical condition following an emergency cesarean section. The baby, a boy, is in our NICU. He's stable but premature. We need you here as soon as possible to make medical decisions if..." The doctor paused, and in that pause I heard everything she wasn't saying. "If she's unable to..." I was moving before I realized I'd stood up. Grabbing my keys, my coat, my phone. Marcus appeared in the doorway, asking questions I didn't hear. I pushed past him, took the stairs because the elevator was too slow, hit the parking garage at a run. "Sir, I need verbal confirmation that you'll..." "I'm coming. Don't let her die. Whatever it costs, whatever you need, don't let her die." I hung up, gunned the engine, and called my pilot before I'd even left the garage. "Get the jet ready. We leave in 30 minutes. Destination: Savannah. Now." The drive to the airstrip took 23 minutes. Every red light felt like a personal insult. Every car in front of me might as well have been standing still. I ran 2 lights, took a turn so sharp my tires screamed, and didn't care about the cop who lit up behind me until I pulled into private aviation and his partner recognized the car, the plates, the name. They let me go without a word. The flight was 2 hours of hell. I sat in the leather seat where Raina and I had flown to Turks and Caicos for our honeymoon, where she'd fallen asleep with her head on my shoulder, and I thought, this is what peace feels like. Now I sat alone, watching the darkness outside the window, my reflection staring back at me like an accusation. A son. I had a son. And the woman who gave him to me might die before I could tell her I was sorry, that I'd burn every empire I'd built if it meant she'd come home, that I'd been half dead for 5 months and didn't realize it until tonight. Marcus had called 3 times. I ignored him, let the business fall apart, let the territories crumble, let every deal I'd ever made turn to dust. None of it mattered. We landed at 4:42 am. A car was waiting, One of my contacts in Savannah, a man who owed me favors and knew better than to ask questions. He drove 90 down empty highways while I sat in the back seat with my hands clenched so tight my knuckles went white. Memorial Hospital, right, boss? Yes. You want me to call ahead, clear? Just drive. He did. The hospital was a concrete block lit up like a prison, all fluorescent lights and sanitized despair. I walked through the emergency entrance, and a security guard moved to stop me until he saw my face, saw whatever lived behind my eyes, and stepped aside. The front desk nurse looked up, opened her mouth to ask for identification, then recognized me from the news, from tabloid covers and business magazines, and that one CNN interview where they asked if I had Mafia connections, and I'd smiled without answering. Room 312, she said quietly. 3rd floor. ICU. I took the stairs. My legs felt like they were made of lead, like every step was dragging me closer to something I couldn't undo, couldn't control, couldn't fix with money or threats or the kind of power I'd spent my whole life building. The ICU was cold, sterile. It smelled like death pretending to be medicine. A nurse outside, 312, stopped me with a gentle hand on my chest. Are you family? I'm her husband. The lie came automatically, and it didn't feel like a lie at all. She studied me for a moment, then nodded and stepped aside. I pushed open the door. The woman in that bed wasn't Raina. Couldn't be Raina. Because Raina was color and warmth and life, and this woman was pale as snow, tubes running from her arms like she was being drained, machines beeping in rhythm with a heartbeat that sounded too slow, too weak, too close to stopping. Her hair was spread across the pillow, shorter than I remembered. Her hands lay still at her sides, no rings, no jewelry, nothing but an 4 taped to the back of her left hand. Her face was turned toward the window where dawn was starting to break, and even unconscious, she looked like she was trying to escape. I stood frozen in the doorway. A monitor beeped. A ventilator hissed. Someone laughed in the hallway, and the sound felt obscene. You can sit with her, the nurse said softly behind me. Talk to her. Some patients can hear even when they seem unconscious. I moved like I was underwater, pulled a chair close to the bed, sat down, stared at her face, the face I'd memorized in 1,000 different lights, in joy and anger and sleep and passion. The face I'd thought I'd never see again. Raina, I whispered, and my voice cracked on her name like I was 17 again, like I'd never learned to be cold. She didn't move, didn't open her eyes, just kept breathing in that shallow, mechanical rhythm. I reached out, stopped myself, then reached out again, and took her hand. It was cold, too cold. I wrapped both of mine around it, trying to push warmth back into her skin. I'm here, I said. I'm here, baby, I'm here. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. The machines kept beeping. The sun kept rising. And Raina kept not waking up. A different nurse came in, older, with kind eyes and hands that moved with practiced efficiency. She checked Raina's vitals, adjusted the 4-drip, made notes on a tablet. How is she? I asked, my voice rough. Critical but stable. The surgery went as well as could be expected given the complications. We stopped the hemorrhaging, but she lost a significant amount of blood. The next 24 hours will tell us more. And the baby? Her expression softened. Would you like to see him? I looked at Raina, at her still face, and felt torn between staying and going, between the woman I'd lost and the child I'd never known existed. She'd want you too, the nurse said gently, like she could read my mind. I stood, pressed a kiss to Raina's forehead. Her skin was cold there too, and followed the nurse down a hallway that smelled like soap and sadness. The NICU was dimmer than the ICU, quieter, filled with tiny plastic boxes that held tiny humans fighting for breath. The nurse led me to the far corner, to an incubator labeled Baby Boy Caldwell, and my heart stopped. He was so small, impossibly small. A little red alien with tubes in his nose and wires taped his chest, wearing nothing but a diaper the size of my palm. His eyes were closed, his fingers curled into fists no bigger than walnuts, and when I leaned closer, I could see his chest rising and falling so fast it looked like he was running a race. He's strong, the nurse said. 31 weeks is early, but we've seen younger babies thrive. He's breathing on his own, which is a very good sign. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. Just stared at this tiny person, my son, and felt something break open inside my chest that I hadn't known was closed. Can I? Not yet. His immune system is too fragile. But you can talk to him. Touch his hand through the portholes. He knows your voice already, even if he's never heard it before. Babies know their parents. I slid my hand through the circular opening, touched one finger to his palm. His fist closed around it immediately, that instinctive baby grip, and I watched his face scrunch up like he was concentrating hard on holding on. Hey, little man, I whispered. I'm your dad. I know I'm late, but I'm here now. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. His heartbeat on the monitor was fast and steady. His oxygen levels were good. And he kept holding my finger like his life depended on it. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. Time stopped meaning anything in that place where everything was measured in heartbeats and breath. A doctor approached, Dr. Nguyen, I assumed the one who'd called. He was young, Vietnamese, exhausted. Mr. Valerio, I'm glad you made it. She nodded, unable to speak, and I transferred Luca into her arms. He looked at her with curious eyes, this stranger with tears on her face, and reached up to pat her cheek like he was trying to figure out why she was sad. Hi, baby, Reina whispered. Hi, sweet boy. I'm your mama. I'm your mama, and I love you so much. Luca considered this, then smiled his gummy smile and grabbed a handful of her hair. We drove to the penthouse in silence. Marcus stayed in the front with Isaiah, asking quiet questions about who he was and where he'd come from. Reina sat in back with Luca on her lap, just holding him, memorizing him, making up for a year of missing moments. I watched them in the rearview mirror and thought about the future, about custody arrangements and therapy, and explaining to my son someday why his mother had to pretend to be dead. About whether Reina and I could ever rebuild what we'd broken, or if we'd just keep hurting each other in new and creative ways. But for now, for this moment, I just let her have him. Let her have this one perfect thing before reality came crashing back in. The penthouse looked different through her eyes. I saw it the moment we walked through the door. She took in the nursery I'd built where her design studio used to be, the toys scattered across the living room floor, the photos I'd hung on the walls of Luca at every stage of his short life. She ran her fingers along the edge of the crib I'd assembled at 3 a.m, touched the mobile hanging above it that played the same lullaby she used to hum. You kept your promise, she said quietly. I told you I would. I didn't believe you. I thought you'd hire nannies and keep doing what you always did. Keep being who you were. I'm not that man anymore. I set down the diaper bag, watched Isaiah explore the space with wide eyes. I couldn't be. Not for him. She turned to face me, still holding Luca against her chest. What happened to the business? The empire?
Gone.
Sold off, transferred, shut down. I kept the legitimate holdings, enough to make sure Luca never wants for anything. But the rest? It's Marcus's problem now. Or the feds. I don't care which. You just walked away. I had to. For him. I stopped myself before I said for you. Because she wasn't here anymore. Hadn't been here. And I'd made my peace with that. Or thought I had. Reina put Luca down in his playpen, watched him immediately grab his favorite stuffed elephant and shove it in his mouth. Then she straightened, faced me fully, and I saw the woman I'd married under all the fear and exhaustion. I need to tell you something, she said. Something I should have told you before I left. Okay. That night. The night I saw you with Jerome. I didn't just see you give the order. I heard what you said after. My stomach dropped. Reina. You told Marcus to make it quick. Painless. You said he's got kids. Make sure they're taken care of. You said his debt dies with him. Don't touch his family. She stepped closer, her voice shaking. I heard you. Be merciful, Dante. Even in that moment, even doing that terrible thing, you were trying to minimize the damage. And it terrified me, because I realized you weren't a monster. You were just a man making impossible choices in an impossible world. That doesn't make it right,
No.
but it makes it complicated. And I ran because I couldn't live in that complication. Couldn't raise a child in that gray area between right and wrong. But these last 12 months, living with Malcolm, watching him justify every manipulation, every lie, every act of control as protection, I learned something. What's that? There are different kinds of monsters. Some wear suits and follow the law. Some break every rule and still manage to be human. She was crying again, but her voice stayed steady. You were never the villain in this story, Dante. You were just the man I was too scared to trust. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to respond to forgiveness I hadn't asked for and probably didn't deserve. What happens now? I asked instead. I don't know. Malcolm's going to prison. That's certain. The evidence I gave them, plus what they'll find when they really dig into his activities, will put him away for 20 years minimum. But that means I need to testify. Which means I need to stay in Miami for a while. Which means you need a place to stay. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. I looked at Isaiah, who'd found Luca's toy bin and was examining a rubber duck like it held the secrets of the universe. Both of you. There's a guest suite on the 3rd floor. Private entrance, private bathroom, far enough from the nursery that you won't wake up every time Luca cries at 2 a.m. Dante. I'm not asking you to come back to me, Reina. I'm not asking you to forget everything that happened or pretend we're still the people we were 3 years ago. I'm just saying, our son needs his mother. And I'm tired of pretending I can do this alone. She looked at Luca, then at me, then at the life I'd built in her absence. And I saw her make a choice. Okay, but we do this slow. We do this careful. And if it doesn't work, if being here hurts more than it helps, then we figure out something else. Together. That first week was strange. Awkward. We moved around each other like dancers who'd forgotten the steps, careful not to touch, careful not to say the things we were both thinking. Reina would take Luca in the mornings while I handled conference calls with lawyers about the last pieces of the empire. I'd take nights while she put Isaiah to bed and tried to rebuild herself from the wreckage Malcolm had left behind. Sometimes I'd hear her singing in the guest suite, old gospel songs her grandmother taught her, lullabies she'd probably sung to Luca before she had to give him up. And I'd stand outside her door like a ghost, listening, wondering if we'd ever get back what we'd lost. Other times she'd find me in the nursery at midnight, just watching Luca sleep, and she'd sit in the other rocking chair without saying anything. Just being there. Just existing in the same space. Slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, we started rebuilding. Not the marriage we had before, but something new. Something honest. She told me about the nightmares she had where Malcolm found her again. I told her about the panic attacks I'd had those first months alone with Luca, convinced I'd break him somehow, convinced I'd turn him into what I'd been. She showed me the scars on her neck, her wrists, places where Malcolm's protection had looked a lot like restraint. I showed her the letters I'd written to Luca for his 18th birthday, explaining everything I couldn't tell him as a child. We learned how to be parents together, tag-teaming diaper changes, negotiating nap schedules, laughing when Luca decided 4 a.m. was an excellent time to practice his new crawling skills. Isaiah bonded with Luca like they were brothers instead of strangers, and watching them play together made something in my chest unclench. 3 months after Cartagena, Reina testified against Malcolm Renner in federal court. I sat in the gallery with Luca on my lap, watching her stay calm and clear while she described a year of manipulation and control. Watching her refuse to back down when Malcolm's lawyers tried to paint her as a liar, a criminal, someone who couldn't be trusted. The jury deliberated for 2 hours, found him guilty on 17 counts. And when they read the verdict, Reina didn't celebrate or cry or show any emotion at all. She just looked back at me, at our son, and nodded once. It's over, that nod said. We're free. That night, after Luca and Isaiah were both asleep, after the lawyers had gone home and the news vans had left our street, Reina found me on the balcony overlooking the city. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not giving up. For becoming the man I always knew you could be. For loving our son the way I prayed you would. I didn't do it for you. I did it for him. I know. That's what makes it real. She stood next to me at the railing, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. The city spread out below us like a constellation of broken promises and second chances, and I thought about the journey that brought us here, the violence and fear and death, but also the hope, the change, the possibility of redemption. I don't know if I can love you again, she said. Not the way I did before. That girl who believed love could fix everything. She died in that hospital the same night they said I did. I know, but maybe we can build something different. Something stronger. Something that doesn't pretend the past didn't happen but doesn't let it define everything that comes next. I looked at her profile in the city lights, at the scars she'd earned surviving both of us, at the strength it took to stand here offering me another chance I didn't deserve. I'd like that, I said. She took my hand, just held it, and we stood there in the warm Miami night while our son slept safely inside, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something close to peace. The months that followed weren't perfect. We fought sometimes, about parenting, about the past, about whether I was being overprotective or she was being too cautious. We had bad days where the weight of everything that happened crushed us both. We had moments where I'd catch her looking at me with fear in her eyes, and moments where she'd catch me staring at her like I expected her to vanish. But we had good days too. Days where Luca took his first steps. From her arms to mine, and back again. Days where Isaiah called me Uncle Dante and asked if I could teach him to tie his shoes. Days where Raina would laugh at something stupid I said, and for a second, she'd look exactly like the girl I'd married. 6 months after the trial, Marcus came to me with news. The Corelli family's been dismantled. Feds hit them hard. Looks like someone's been feeding information about their operations for months. He gave me a knowing look. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Not a thing.
Right.
Well, word on the street is that Miami's organized crime scene is the cleanest it's been in 20 years. Some people are saying you destroyed the underworld from the inside out. Others are saying you went soft and got lucky. What do they call it? Quiet justice. Something like that. You happy, boss? With this life? He gestured vaguely at the penthouse, at the sound of children laughing somewhere inside. Yeah, Marcus. I think I am.
Good.
Because I'm out too. Teresa and I are moving to Atlanta, opening a restaurant. Something clean, something legal, something our kids can be proud of. You deserve it. So do you. After he left, I found Raina in the nursery, reading to both boys from a picture book about a caterpillar who became a butterfly. Luca was asleep against her chest. Isaiah was fighting it, his eyes drooping even as he insisted he wasn't tired. Room for one more? I asked from the doorway. She looked up, smiled. That real smile I'd been waiting months to see, and shifted to make space beside her. I sat down, wrapped my arm around her shoulders, and listened to her voice turn a children's story into magic. And I thought about transformation, about how sometimes you have to completely destroy what you were to become what you're meant to be. I thought about the man who'd stood in that warehouse and watched Jerome beg for his life. The man who'd believed power was the only currency that mattered. The man who'd thought love was a weakness he couldn't afford. That man was dead. I'd killed him piece by piece, choice by choice, until all that remained was this: a father, a partner, someone trying every day to be worthy of the second chance he'd been given. Dante, Raina whispered, Isaiah now asleep on her other side. Yeah, I love you. Not the same way I did before, but maybe better. Because this time I know exactly who you are, and I'm choosing you anyway. I kissed the top of her head, breathed in the scent of her shampoo mixed with baby powder and old books. I love you too, and I promise I'll spend the rest of my life proving you didn't choose wrong. She leaned into me, and we sat there in the dim nursery while our children slept, and the city outside the window kept spinning, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the ocean like applause. Years later, Luca would ask me about his mother's scars, about why there were no photos of his first year with both of us together, about the rumors kids at school whispered about the Valerio name. And I'd tell him the truth, or as much of it as he could handle. I'd tell him that sometimes people we love make choices that hurt us, and sometimes we make choices that hurt them back, and the only thing that matters is whether we're brave enough to keep choosing each other despite the pain. I'd tell him his mother was the strongest person I'd ever known. That she ran not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to protect him from a world I'd built out of violence. I'd tell him I wasn't always a good man, that I did things I couldn't take back, hurt people I couldn't heal, but that he, this beautiful, smart, kind boy, made me want to be better, made me believe I could be. And when he asked if people could really change, if monsters could become men, I'd look at his mother across the dinner table and say yes, because she proved it to me every single day. But that conversation was years away. For now, there was just this. A quiet night in a home built on honesty instead of fear, with a woman I'd lost and found again, and 2 children who'd never know how close their family came to never existing at all. I carried Isaiah to his room, tucked him in with the stuffed rabbit he couldn't sleep without. Raina carried Luca, laid him down in his crib, and we stood together watching him dream. "You think we'll make it?" she whispered. "I think we already did. Everything else is just details." She took my hand, laced her fingers through mine, and we walked out of that nursery into whatever came next, together, imperfect, but alive and choosing each other one more time. And somewhere in the city below, in the empire I'd burned down to build something better, in the quiet spaces between what we were and what we'd become, justice whispered instead of roared. The kind of justice nobody sees but everyone feels. The kind that changes everything without making a sound. If this story moved you, if it made you believe that people can change even when everything says they can't, then I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. Because next week, I'm bringing you another story of quiet redemption, a tale of second chances, and the impossible choices we make for the people we love. Drop a heart in the comments if you believe in second chances. Tell me your thoughts about Dante and Raina's journey. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to become the person you were meant to be. And remember, the most powerful transformations happen in silence. The greatest victories are the ones nobody sees. And sometimes, the truest form of strength is knowing when to walk away from the power everyone else is fighting for. This is your narrator, signing off. Until next time, keep believing in the quiet justice that changes the world one choice at a time.
Subscribe. Share.
And never stop believing that broken things can be made beautiful again. I spent the next 3 days making arrangements. Transferred full custody of Luca to Marcus in legal documents that would hold up in any court. Set up trust funds that would take care of my son until he was 30. Wrote letters to be opened on his 18th birthday, explaining everything I could never tell him face to face. And I bought a plane ticket to Cartagena, one way, because I didn't know if I'd be coming back. The flight to Colombia took 4 hours. I sat in first class with a window seat, watching the ocean turn from green to blue to impossible turquoise, and thought about all the choices that had led me here, to this plane, to this moment, to gambling my son's future on a woman who might not want to be saved. I'd left Luca with Marcus and his wife Teresa, a woman who'd raised 3 boys of her own and knew how to handle a baby better than I ever would. Luca had cried when I handed him over, reaching for me with those little hands, and I'd almost changed my mind right there in the doorway. But Teresa had taken him gently, bounced him on her hip, and given me a look that said, "You better come home." I didn't make promises I couldn't keep. Cartagena was heat and color and noise, street vendors selling fruit I didn't recognize, music pouring from every doorway, buildings painted in shades that hurt to look at after Miami's steel and glass. I checked into a hotel in the old city under a fake name, paid cash, and spent the first night walking the streets until I found the doc from the photo. The second message had included coordinates. A meeting place near the water, far from tourists, where shipping containers sat rusting in the salt air and men spoke in rapid Spanish that I only half understood. I arrived an hour early, checked every angle, every shadow, every place a sniper could hide. Came alone like Renner had demanded, but I wasn't stupid. I had a knife in my boot and a gun tucked against my spine that I hoped I would need. The sun was setting when I saw her. She came from the south, walking slow, like her legs weren't quite working right. She wore a simple dress that hung loose on a frame that was too thin, and her hair was pulled back showing that scar, thick and raised and pink like it was still healing. And she was holding a child's hand. A little boy, maybe 2 years old, with dark curls and skin the same warm brown as hers. My heart stopped. My legs stopped. Everything stopped. She saw me and froze too, her free hand going to her throat like she was checking to make sure she could still breathe. Dante, she said, and her voice was exactly the same.
Exactly.
You're alive. I can explain. You better. We stood 20 feet apart, staring at each other across broken concrete and dying light, and I didn't know whether to run to her or run away. Then Malcolm Renner stepped out from behind a shipping container, and everything made terrible sense. He was older than his photos, maybe 50, with gray hair cut military short and a smile that made my skin crawl. He moved like someone who'd trained to kill and enjoyed it, and when he put his hand on Raina's shoulder, possessive, intimate, I had to lock my knees to keep from charging. Dante Valerio. The great Don himself, showing up unarmed and alone. I didn't think you had it in you. Let her go. Let her go? She came to me, Valerio. When you were busy playing gangster, when you were putting bodies in the ground, she came to me and begged for protection. Begged me to help her disappear before you killed her too. I never. Didn't you? He stepped closer, still keeping Raina behind him like a shield. You think she didn't see what you really were? You think love was enough to erase all that blood? I looked past him to Raina, to her eyes that were filled with tears and something that might have been regret or might have been relief. Is that true? Did you come to him? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the child holding her hand, then back at me. Yes. One word. One bullet straight through whatever was left of my heart. But it wasn't, she started, then stopped when Malcolm squeezed her shoulder hard enough that I saw her wince. Here's how this works, Malcolm said, pulling a gun from his jacket with his free hand. You're going to walk away. You're going to forget you ever saw her. And you're going to spend the rest of your life wondering if that kid you're raising is even yours, or if she was already pregnant when she ran. White noise filled my head. Static. Rage. What did you say? You heard me. How do you know Luca is your son? How do you know she wasn't sleeping with someone else, planning her exit, using you for cover? Stop it. Raina's voice was sharp, shaking. Malcolm, you promised you wouldn't. Shut up. He jerked her back against his chest, pressed the gun against her temple. The little boy started crying. And something in me went very, very cold. Let them go, Renner. Whatever you want, money, information, my head on a plate, you can have it. Just let them go. I don't want your money. I want you to suffer. I want you to spend every day for the rest of your life wondering if anything she told you is real. Wondering if that baby you're playing father to is actually some other man's son. Wondering if she ever loved you at all, or if it was all just part of the plan to bring you down. He was lying. Had to be lying. I'd seen the hospital records, the birth certificate, the DNA match that proved Luca was mine. Unless those records had been faked too. Unless everything, the pregnancy, the hospital, the death, all of it, was just one long con to destroy me from the inside out. Raina was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Dante, please. He's not. This isn't what you think. Then tell me the truth. My voice came out quiet.
Dead.
Tell me right now, Raina. Is Luca my son? She looked at me with those eyes I'd memorized in 1,000 different moments, and I watched her make a choice.
Yes.
God, yes, Dante. He's yours. He was always yours. Malcolm laughed. And you believe her? After everything? I believe her. Because I did. Because even if everything else was lies, even if she'd played me from the start, I knew what I'd seen in the hospital. A woman dying to bring a child into the world. A woman who'd used her last breath to keep him safe from me. You don't fake that kind of love. Then you're a fool. Malcolm cocked the gun. And fools die. But before his finger could move, Raina did. She reached up to her neck, to a thin silver chain I hadn't noticed before, and ripped it off. Something small fell into her palm. A locket, I thought, or maybe a pendant. She held it up where I could see. I recorded everything, she said, her voice strong now, cutting through the fear. Every conversation. Every threat. Every time you told me what you'd do to Dante if I didn't help you. It's all here, Malcolm. All of it. His face went white, then red, then something close to purple. You little. It's already uploaded. My lawyer has instructions to release it if anything happens to me. Or to him. She nodded at me. So, you can kill us both, but you'll go down with us. The Bureau will know you fabricated evidence. They'll know you manipulated a federal witness. They'll know you've been running your own operation under their nose for years. The gun wavered. Malcolm's hand shook, and for the first time since I'd met his eyes, I saw something besides arrogance. I saw panic. Raina. Let us go.
Now.
And maybe I'll forget to send it. Malcolm Renner's gun was still pressed against Raina's head, but his hand was shaking so hard I could see it from where I stood. The little boy, the child I'd thought was some kind of sick mind game, had stopped crying and was staring up at his mother with eyes that looked familiar in a way that made my chest tight. You're bluffing, Malcolm said, but his voice cracked on the words. Try me. Raina's fingers closed around the locket. I've got nothing left to lose, Malcolm. You already took everything from me. My life, my name, my... She glanced at me, and something in her expression crumbled. You made me choose between living in fear and living at all. So yeah, I recorded you. Every threat. Every manipulation. Every time you told me Dante would kill me if I went back. Every time you said my son would grow up without a mother if I didn't do exactly what you said. I was protecting you. You were controlling me. There's a difference. The sun had dropped below the horizon now, leaving everything in that purple-gray twilight where nothing looks quite real. Somewhere behind us, water lapped against the dock. A dog barked in the distance. And the three of us stood frozen in a triangle of gun and lies and the ghost of something that used to be love. Give me the recording, Malcolm said.
No.
Raina. I said no. His finger tightened on the trigger, and I moved without thinking, closed the distance between us in 3 steps, grabbed his wrist, twisted hard enough to hear something pop. The gun went off, but the bullet went wide, pinging off metal somewhere to our left. Malcolm screamed, dropped the weapon, and I caught it before it hit the ground. Now I was the one holding the gun. Now I was the one with power. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want it. Run, I told Raina. Take the boy and run. She didn't move. Just stood there holding that locket like it was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. I can't. Why not? Because if I run, he'll find me again. He always finds me. Her voice broke. And next time, he won't hesitate. Next time, he'll just kill us both and make it look like you did it. She was right. I knew she was right. Malcolm was federal, connected, had resources that made my old empire look like a lemonade stand. If he wanted someone gone, they'd disappear so clean even their DNA would stop existing. Unless he disappeared first. I looked at the gun in my hand. Looked at Malcolm clutching his wrist, his face twisted with pain and rage, and something that looked like satisfaction. Like he'd been waiting for this, like he knew I'd do exactly what he expected. Go ahead, he said, breathing hard. Kill me. Prove you're still the monster everyone says you are. Show her the real Dante Valerio. It would be so easy. 1 bullet. 1 second. 1 body in the water, where sharks would take care of the evidence before sunrise. I'd done it before. Would probably do it again if I went back to the life I'd left behind. But I'd made a promise to a dead woman. Made a promise to a son who was learning to smile. Made a promise to myself that I'd be different, that I'd be better, that I'd build a world where violence wasn't the answer to everything. So I lowered the gun. I'm not going to kill you, Renner. I'm going to do something worse. What's that? I'm going to let you live. Let you watch while your whole operation falls apart. Let you explain to your superiors how you manipulated a federal witness, falsified death records, and ran an illegal protection racket on the side. You can't prove any of that. She can. I nodded at Raina. That recording you're so worried about? It's already gone viral. I sent a copy to the FBI field office in Miami, to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, to the Inspector General's office, and to about a dozen reporters who love stories about corrupt agents almost as much as they love stories about corrupt mobsters. I was bluffing. Mostly. I had no idea what was actually on that recording, or if it even existed. But I knew how to play a hand, knew how to read the fear in someone's eyes when they realized they'd lost. Malcolm's face confirmed everything. You're lying. Am I? Check your phone. See if you've got any missed calls from your boss. Or from internal affairs. Or from the federal prosecutor who's been building a case against dirty agents for the last 18 months. He fumbled for his phone with his good hand. Checked the screen. And I watched all the color drain from his face. 37 missed calls. Texts from numbers he clearly recognized. And probably a voicemail from someone telling him to turn himself in before they sent a tactical team to bring him in. Raina, he said, his voice going soft, pleading. You don't understand. I was trying to protect you. Everything I did was for you. She cut him off, cold and clear. Not for me. Not for my son. For you and your obsession with taking Dante down. You didn't save me, Malcolm. You just locked me in a different cage. I loved you. No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me. The damsel you rescued from the monster. But the monster changed, and you couldn't let that story go. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I'd married under all the scars and trauma. Saw strength I'd forgotten she had. Saw the person who'd survived both of us. We need to go, I said quietly, before he does something stupid. She nodded, scooped up the little boy who'd been watching everything with two old eyes, and moved toward me. Not quite close enough to touch, but close enough that I could smell her shampoo, different than before, but familiar in a way that made my throat tight. What about him? She asked, glancing back at Malcolm. Let the feds handle it. We walked away as sirens started wailing in the distance. Walked past shipping containers and broken concrete, and into the narrow streets of old Cartagena where tourists were laughing and music was playing and nobody knew that 3 lives had just been rearranged like puzzle pieces that finally fit. Raina didn't say anything for 6 blocks. Just walked beside me with her son on her hip, her breathing hard, her eyes straight ahead. Finally, I had to ask, who is he? The boy. She stopped under a streetlight that cast shadows across her face. His name is Isaiah. He's Malcolm's nephew. His sister died 2 years ago, overdose, and Malcolm got custody. But he's not. He wasn't good with kids. Wasn't good with people, period. So I've been helping take care of him. Helping raise him. While Malcolm held you hostage. While I try to stay alive. She adjusted Isaiah on her hip, and he laid his head on her shoulder, exhausted. When I found out I was pregnant, when I realized I couldn't raise Luca in your world, I went to Malcolm. He'd been investigating you for months, trying to flip your crew. He offered me witness protection in exchange for testimony.
But then you started changing.
Started dismantling everything. And his case fell apart. So, he faked your death. He said it was the only way to keep me safe. Said you'd come after me if you knew I'd talk to the feds. Said the only way to protect Luca was to make you think we were both gone. She laughed, bitter and broken. I believed him. God help me, I believed him. And the hospital? The death certificate? All fake. The woman who died, I don't know who she was. Malcolm said she was a Jane Doe, unclaimed, and he had contacts who could make the paperwork say whatever he needed it to say. He staged everything, made me watch from another room while you stood over her body. Made me watch you break while he told me it was the only way. I couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
The weight of it, the manipulation, the lies, the year I'd spent grieving a woman who was alive, crashed over me like a wave. Why didn't you run? Once you realized what he was doing, why didn't you just disappear? With what money? With what resources? Malcolm controlled everything, my documents, my access to cash, even the apartment I was living in. And he had Isaiah. He'd remind me every day that if I tried to leave, if I went to the authorities, he'd make sure Isaiah went into the system. Make sure I never saw him again. So I stayed. And I waited. And I recorded every conversation we had, hoping someday I'd have enough evidence to bury him. The locket was my grandmother's, had a chip inside where I stored everything. Took me 8 months to get enough that would hold up in court. She looked at me finally, and her eyes were wet. I was going to come back, Dante. Once I had enough to put Malcolm away, once I knew it was safe, I was going to come back for you and Luca. I swear I was. Do you know what the last year has been like? Watching our son grow up without you. Trying to be the father you asked me to be while wondering if I was doing everything wrong. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Reina. I know that too. We stood there under that streetlight while the world moved around us. Couples walking hand in hand, children chasing each other through the square, music drifting from open doorways. Normal people living normal lives, oblivious to the wreckage two broken people were trying to make sense of. I need to see him, Reina said finally.
Luca.
I need to see my son. I don't know if that's a good idea. Please, Dante. Just once. Just let me see that he's okay, that he's healthy, that you kept your promise. Then I'll go. I'll disappear for real this time, if that's what you want. What did I want? I'd spent a year learning to live without her, learning to be a father, learning to be someone who didn't solve problems with violence and fear. I'd built a new life from the ashes of the old one, and bringing her back into it would complicate everything. But she was still Reina. Still the woman who'd made me believe I could be better. Still the mother of my child. Come with me, I said. But we do this my way. We do this slow. And if at any point I think this is going to hurt him, I understand. The flight back to Miami was quiet. Reina sat across the aisle from me with Isaiah sleeping in her lap, staring out the window at clouds that looked solid enough to walk on. I watched her when she wasn't looking, trying to reconcile this thin, scared version with the woman who'd decorated my penthouse and made me laugh and called me by my real name.
She changed.
We both had. And I didn't know if the people we'd become could exist in the same space. Marcus met us at the airport with Luca strapped to his chest in one of those baby carriers, and I watched Reina's face when she saw him. Watched her hand go to her mouth. Watched tears start falling before she could stop them. Watched her take 3 steps forward and then freeze like she'd hit an invisible wall. That's him, she whispered. That's him. Luca was awake, his eyes tracking the movement and noise of the terminal, one hand wrapped around Marcus's finger. He'd grown in the 5 days I'd been gone, or maybe I'd just forgotten how fast babies changed. His hair was getting longer, curling at the ends like Reina's used to. His cheeks were full and healthy. And when he saw me, his whole face lit up with recognition that made my chest hurt. Duh, he said, clear as day. First real word. First real moment of pure joy. I took him from Marcus, held him close, breathed in that baby smell of milk and soap and something indefinably sweet. Miss me, little man? He grabbed my nose. Laughed when I pretended it hurt. Reina was crying openly now, and Marcus looked at her like he'd seen a ghost. Boss. Who is? Long story. I'll explain later. I turned to Reina. You want to hold him? What does he need? What can I do? Right now?
Time.
Monitoring. We'll keep him in the NICU for several weeks at least, until his lungs are stronger and he can regulate his own body temperature. After that, he paused. After that depends on his mother. She's going to make it. I said it like a command, like I could force the universe to obey. Dr. Nguyen's expression told me he'd seen too many people try that trick and fail. We're doing everything we can. But you should know, the damage was extensive. Even if she pulls through, there could be complications. Long-term effects. She might need months of recovery. Whatever it takes. Whatever it costs. He nodded, unsurprised. We'll keep you updated. For now, I'd suggest you get some rest. There's a family waiting room on this floor with. I'm not leaving. He looked at me, then at my son still gripping my finger and nodded again. I'll have someone bring you coffee.
He left.
The nurse followed, and I stood there in the dim quiet of the NICU, watching my son breathe, and made promises I had no idea how to keep. I'd give up everything. The business, the empire, the name that made men afraid. I'd burn it all down and walk away clean if it meant this little boy would grow up safe, if it meant Reina would live to hold him, if it meant I could be the man she believed I was before I proved her wrong. But first, she had to wake up. 3 hours later, she did. I was back in room 312, sitting in that plastic chair with my head in my hands, when I heard a soft sound like breath catching, like someone surfacing from deep water. I looked up. Reina's eyes were open. Not all the way. Not focused. But open, staring at the ceiling like she was trying to remember where she was, what had happened, why everything hurt. Reina. I was on my feet, leaning over the bed rail. Reina, baby, can you hear me? Her eyes moved slowly, searching, until they found my face. And when they did, I watched awareness flood back. Recognition, confusion, then something that looked like grief. Antonio, she whispered, her voice destroyed, barely there. I grabbed her hand, held it tight. I'm here. You're okay. You're in the hospital, but you're okay. The baby. Panic flashed across her face. She tried to sit up, gasped in pain, fell back against the pillows. Where's? I can't feel. He's okay. He's alive. He's in the NICU, but he's strong, Reina. He's perfect. Tears started sliding down her temples into her hair. You came. Of course I came. I didn't think you would. Her eyes closed, opened again with effort. I hoped you wouldn't find out. That hurt more than any bullet I'd ever taken. You were going to keep him from me? To keep him safe from you. Her words were slurred from painkillers, but clear enough to cut. From your world. From everything you are. I flinched like she'd hit me. Deserved it. Knew it was true. Reina, don't. She turned her head away, staring at the window where sunlight was burning through clouds. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't tell me you've changed when we both know you haven't. Then let me show you. Let me prove it. She laughed, and it sounded like crying.
How?
By retiring? By walking away from everything? Men like you don't get happy endings, Antonio. You just drag everyone down with you when you fall. A nurse came in then, checking monitors, adjusting medications, giving us both a reason not to talk. When she left, Reina's eyes were closing again, her body surrendering to exhaustion and trauma and whatever was dripping through her fore. I need you to promise me something, she whispered, and I leaned closer to hear. Promise me he won't grow up in your world. Promise me you'll let him be normal. Let him be safe. I promise. You're lying. I'm not. Reina, I swear on everything. You can't protect what you destroy, Dante. She used my full name like a weapon, like a reminder of who I really was beneath the man who held her hand. And you destroy everything you touch. I opened my mouth to argue, to beg, to tell her she was wrong even though we both knew she wasn't. But her eyes had closed again, and within seconds her breathing had evened out into something deeper than sleep. I sat back down, watched her chest rise and fall, listened to machines count her heartbeats, and thought about every choice I'd ever made that led to this moment. A hospital room at dawn, a son I couldn't hold, and a woman who'd rather die than let me near her. Hours passed. Doctors came and went. My phone buzzed with messages from Marcus, from business partners, from people whose problems suddenly seemed smaller than molecules. I ignored them all. At some point, the older nurse from before brought me coffee and a sandwich I didn't eat. She also brought paperwork, birth certificate forms, insurance documents, next of kin designations. The baby needs a name, she said gently. For the records. I looked at the blank line. Thought about all the names that carried weight in my world. Family names, power names, names that opened doors and closed coffins. Then I thought about the one name Reina had whispered in her sleep once, years ago, when I'd asked her what she'd name a son, if she ever had one. Luca, I said.
Luca Antonio Valerio.
The nurse wrote it down. Made it real. made him mine in a way that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with the man I was going to have to become. When the sun set that night, I was still sitting in that chair, still holding Raina's hand, still making promises I didn't know how to keep. And somewhere down the hall, in a plastic box surrounded by machines, my son was breathing, fighting, living. 2 days later, Raina Caldwell stopped breathing. Her heart monitor flatlined at 4:17 am. The crash team came running. I was pushed into the hallway while they worked, watching through the window as they pumped her chest, shocked her heart, pumped again. Watching the line on the monitor stay flat. Watching them try one more time, then another, then share looks that meant what I already knew. She was gone. At 4:33 am, Dr. Nguyen came out and told me what his eyes had already said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Valerio. We did everything we could." I nodded. Didn't speak.
Couldn't.
"Would you like to see her?" I went back into that room. They'd removed the tubes, turned off the machines, covered her up to her shoulders with a white blanket. She looked peaceful, like she was sleeping. Like any second she'd open her eyes and call me by my real name and everything would be okay. But she didn't. And it wasn't. I stood there until sunrise, holding her hand while it grew cold, memorizing her face one last time, and making a promise to a woman who couldn't hear it anymore. "I'll keep him safe. I'll be better. I'll be the man you thought I was. I swear it, Raina. I swear on everything that's left of me." The sun came up. The hospital woke up. And I walked out of that room a different man than the one who'd walked in, a father without a wife, a killer trying to be clean, and someone who finally understood that you can't control what matters most. Would you forgive someone who destroyed you if they showed up when you needed them most? Tell me in the comments. I read every word. And if this story is gripping your heart like it's gripping mine, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next will change everything. 6 months after I buried Raina, I became 2 different men living in the same skin. During the day, I was still Dante Valerio, the name that made boardrooms go quiet, the man who controlled half of Miami's underground economy. I showed up to meetings in $1,000 suits, signed contracts that moved millions, and kept my face as cold as the marble floors in my office. But every night at 6 p.m., I'd leave that world behind and drive to a nursery painted soft blue, where a boy who looked exactly like me was learning to smile. Luca came home from the hospital after 8 weeks. 8 weeks of sitting beside his incubator, watching monitors, talking to him through plastic walls, and learning a kind of fear I'd never known existed. The fear that something so small and perfect could just stop breathing while you weren't looking. The doctors said he was a fighter. Said most preemies his size didn't do as well. Said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like I'd stolen something that wasn't mine to keep. My mansion became 2 houses in one. Downstairs was power, security monitors, encrypted phones, meetings that happened after midnight. Upstairs was peace, bottles warming in the kitchen, lullabies playing on repeat, and me sitting in a rocking chair at 3 a.m. with Luca against my chest, his heartbeat tapping against mine like Morse code for stay alive, stay alive, stay alive. I learned how to change diapers in the dark, how to make formula at the exact right temperature, how to tell the difference between his hungry cry and his tired cry and his something's wrong cry that made my blood turn cold. I kept every appointment with his pediatrician, memorized his vaccination schedule, bought every book about child development I could find. My underboss, Marcus, thought I'd lost my mind. "The Dawn changing diapers?" he said one night, standing in my kitchen while I sterilized bottles. "Man, you've gone soft." I looked at him over my shoulder. "Say that again." He didn't. But I knew what my people were thinking. Knew the whispers in the ranks, that grief had broken me, that fatherhood had made me weak, that the empire was going to crumble because I couldn't keep my focus where it belonged. They didn't understand. This wasn't weakness. This was the first real strength I'd ever had. The kind that didn't come from fear or money or the ability to hurt people who crossed me. This was loving something more than I loved power. And it was destroying everything I'd built. I started small. Started clean. Started dismantling the Valerio empire piece by piece like I was defusing a bomb that had been ticking my whole life. First, I sold the shipping company, the one that moved containers that customs never checked too carefully. Sold it to a legitimate corporation out of Singapore, walked away with clean money and no questions asked. Then I closed 3 nightclubs that laundered cash through bottle service and VIP rooms. Just shut them down, paid off the leases, and let the buildings sit empty while my accountants worked out how to make the numbers look legal. I transferred half my real estate holdings into a trust with Luca's name on it, properties that had always been clean, hotels and office buildings that generated income, without bodies buried in the foundation. My crew didn't understand. My rivals thought it was a trap. The feds watched and waited for me to slip up, to give them the opening they'd been hunting for 10 years. But I wasn't playing games anymore. I was building a world where my son could say his last name without people flinching, where he could go to school without kids whispering about his father, where he could grow up and choose to be anything except what I was. Luca's first Christmas, I bought him a tiny Santa outfit and took a photo that I kept in my wallet next to the only picture I had of Raina smiling. He was 6 months old, chunky and healthy, with eyes that were turning from baby blue to that same silver gray I saw in the mirror. He couldn't sit up yet, couldn't say anything but babbling sounds that might have been words if you listened hard enough. But when I held him, he'd grab my finger and hold on like I was the only solid thing in a world that kept moving too fast. "Your mama would be proud of you," I told him that night, sitting in the dark nursery with snow falling outside the window. Fake snow, because Miami didn't do real winters, but I'd hired a company to make it look like we did. "She'd be proud of how strong you are, how you fought to be here." He made a sound that might have been agreement, might have been gas. I kissed the top of his head and kept rocking. Marcus came to me in February with news I'd been expecting. "The Corelli family is moving on your territories. They think you're weak. They're taking over the dock operations in South Beach, and they're not asking permission." I looked at Lucas sleeping in his bouncer beside my desk, his little chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. "Let them have it." Marcus stared at me like I'd spoken Chinese. "Boss, if we don't respond, if we don't show strength." I said, "Let them have it. They'll think." "I don't care what they think." I stood up, walked to the window, watched the city lights blur into constellations of gold and white. "I'm out, Marcus. I'm done." Done with what? All of it. The territories, the operations, the whole game. I'm transferring my remaining interests to you and the other captains. Everything gets split clean. You want to keep running things the old way, that's your business. But I'm walking away. The silence behind me was so thick I could hear Luca's breathing from across the room. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. They'll come after you. The Corellis, the feds, everyone who's got a grudge. They'll see this as blood in the water. Then I'll deal with it. But I'm not dragging my son into this life, Marcus. I won't do it." He left without another word. And over the next 3 months, I finished what I'd started, dividing the empire, selling off the pieces, and burning every bridge that led back to the man I used to be. I even started working with the feds. Anonymous tips about rival operations, information about trafficking routes, evidence that helped them close cases they'd been building for years. I never gave them anything about my own people. I wasn't a rat, wasn't going to put my crew in prison. But everyone else? Fair game. I thought I'd cover my tracks. Thought I'd been careful enough that no one would trace it back to me. I was wrong. On a Tuesday morning in late April, when Luca was 9 months old and starting to pull himself up on furniture, when I was in the kitchen making breakfast and singing off-key to music only I could hear, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. 3 words.
No signature.
No context. She's not dead. I dropped the phone. It clattered on the tile floor. Luca looked up from his play mat, startled by the noise, his bottom lip trembling like he might cry. I picked him up, held him close, felt his warm weight against my chest while my mind tried to process what I'd just read. Raina. It had to be about Raina. But that was impossible. I'd watched them pull the sheet over her face. I'd signed the death certificate. I'd buried her in a cemetery in Charleston next to her grandmother, had stood in the rain while they lowered her casket into the ground, and felt like I was being buried with her. She was dead. Unless she wasn't. The second message came an hour later. An image file, no text. My hand shook when I opened it. The photo was grainy, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. But I'd know that face anywhere, even thinner than I remembered, even with a jagged scar running along the side of her neck like someone had tried to cut her throat and barely missed. Raina.
Alive.
Walking along a dock with turquoise water in the background and colonial buildings painted yellow and pink. The timestamp on the photo was from 3 days ago.
Cartagena, Colombia.
I called Marcus. I need you at the house.
Now.
He arrived 20 minutes later, let himself in with the key I'd given him for emergencies. Found me in my office with Luca on my hip, staring at my computer screen like I could make it tell me something different than what I already knew. What's going on? I showed him the messages. The photo. Watched his face shift from confused to shocked to something that looked like fear. Boss, this could be a setup. Someone trying to mess with your head, get you off balance. That's her. I know it's her.
How? You saw her die.
I was at the funeral. I don't know how, Marcus. But that's Raina. And if she's alive, if she's been alive this whole time. I couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't put words to the rage and relief and betrayal all colliding in my chest. What do you want me to do? Find out who sent these messages. Trace the number, the photo, everything. And get me everything you can on American citizens who've entered Colombia in the last 6 months. Focus on women matching her description. He nodded, already pulling out his phone. And if we find her, then I'm getting answers. It took Marcus 48 hours to confirm what I already knew in my gut. The photo is real, taken in Cartagena's historic district. The phone number traced back to a burner purchased in Bogota, and buried in witness protection records that Marcus's contact at the FBI shouldn't have been able to access, a file on Raina Caldwell, relocated under federal protection after providing testimony that never happened. She'd faked her death. With government help. With doctors who falsified records and nurses who lied about what they'd seen. With someone who had enough power to make a body disappear and a woman vanish into thin air.
But why?
The answer came in a third message, this time with a name attached. Malcolm Renner sends his regards. If you want her back, come to Cartagena.
Come alone.
You have 1 week. Malcolm Renner. I knew that name. Federal agent turned private security consultant, worked organized crime cases for 15 years before he supposedly retired. He'd been on my tail back when Raina and I were still married, had tried to flip some of my lower-level guys, had failed and disappeared from Miami around the same time Raina left. The pieces started falling into place like a puzzle I should have seen months ago. Malcolm had gotten to Raina, had convinced her to help bring me down, promised her protection, promised her a way out. When I'd started dismantling the empire on my own, when his case fell apart, he'd faked her death to protect his asset. Or to keep her for himself. And now he wanted me to come alone. To walk into whatever trap he'd spent the last year building. Marcus stood in my office reading over the messages, his jaw tight. You can't go. You know that, right? This is suicide. I have to.
Why?
She left you. She faked her death. She let you think she was gone while you were. He gestured at the nursery down the hall, at the life I'd built in her absence. Boss, she doesn't want to be found. Then why send the photo? Why contact me at all? Because Renner wants you dead, and he's using her as bait.
He was right.
I knew he was right. Every logical part of my brain was screaming that this was a trap, that I'd be walking into an execution, that I'd never make it home to Luca. But the part of me that still heard Raina's voice in the dark, that still woke up reaching for her, that still wondered if I could have saved her, that part didn't care about logic. If she's alive, I have to know why she ran. I have to know if there's any chance. Of what? Getting her back. Boss, she watched you kill a man. She ran because she was scared of you. What makes you think anything's changed? Because I'm not that man anymore. I looked at Lucas sleeping in his crib on the monitor, at this tiny human who'd turned me into someone I didn't recognize. And if there's even a chance she's in danger, if Renner's using her for leverage or keeping her against her will, I can't just leave her there. Marcus closed his eyes, rubbed his face with both hands. Then let me come with you. Let me bring a team, do this smart. He said alone. And you believe him?
No.
But I believe if I show up with an army, she dies. And I won't risk that.